Welcome to LYLAS. If you grew up in the 90s and know what that stands for, then this podcast is for you.
My gosh, here we are, episode 11.
Episode
What?
11. I'm excited to talk about this one. This is kind of something that's always going on in the back of my mind. And I'm interested to hear your take on it and just to see what other people, what other people are thinking if they find themselves in the same sort of situation.
Yeah, and especially with us just kind of coming out of the Easter season,
Mhm.
maybe some of this stuff is a little bit more kind of like fresh in our minds. And so, again, doing things in our timely, genuine self. Here we go. We're taking on the big R though this week.
I know. My grandfather used to say two things not to talk about in good company is religion and politics. So we're not going to talk politics today, but we are going to talk religion. We've kind of titled this one "Religious Mutt" because I think that um, so well describes sort of the religion that we subscribe to right now. We had talked about this, and I know for me personally, I consider myself a pretty spiritual person. I think you would say the same for yourself. But I don't go to church every Sunday. And, I read the Bible sometimes. I have more like a daily devotional that I'll read, or, I do pray every single day.
Mhm.
So I definitely consider myself a pretty spiritual person. But, as my mom would say, I'm not there every time the doors swing open. And
Mhm.
so it's interesting for me that um, I feel like our generation of we just sort of grew up in the church. It wasn't like a conscious thought that my parents had to be like, okay, we need to introduce them to God or a religion, or maybe it was. But I think so for us, for so many of our generation that maybe doesn't go to church on a weekly basis, it is more of a conversation of how are we going to introduce the spiritual side of ourself to our children. At least for me,
Mhm.
that's been something that's been that I consider to be a priority. Now, what have I done to make that happen? I've taken Jack to church one time. I think it's when I was maybe pregnant or just had right after I had Jolie. I took him to a church
Mhm.
one time. So, I mean, we talk about God, but it's definitely not, the way that I grew up. Um, so I grew up in a Baptist church. My dad wanted us to be raised Baptist, and so we started going to this Baptist church in Milton, West Virginia, and we went every Sunday in our Sunday best. And right
Aw.
around the time my parents divorced, my mom just, I think she was feeling a little uncomfortable in that setting and maybe wanted to return to her roots, which was Catholicism. So around the age of like 6 or 7, we started going to a Catholic church every Sunday. And my brother and I, being not Catholic, could not take communion. So we would sit awkwardly in the pew as everyone got up to go take their body of Christ.
Right.
And Jason and I would just sit there like, cool. But I really appreciated kind of the rituals of Catholicism and I really enjoyed it. We didn't know the prayers. I mean, we didn't know any of it, but I enjoyed watching it and kind of learning over time or asking my mom questions. I mean, she had gone through Catholic school, so she obviously
Didn't know
had a
that.
deep understanding for that. Yes, she graduated from a Catholic high school in Louisville, Kentucky. So she was raised Catholic, and her whole family practices as
Mm.
Catholics currently. So just a totally different dynamic than what I had grown up as a young child. How about you? I mean, I know how we actually, I would say, became friends through church
Yes.
in many ways, but how were
My,
you raised? What was your mom's religion? Did your mom go to church?
yeah. Yeah. So it turned out that my great grandfather was a Episcopal priest in literally Wuhan, China. So now we all know where Wuhan is from the, lovely coronavirus that came out, right? But that's where he was a mission at, and my grandfather and his brother were actually born in China. And so my grandfather's name was Didi. That means like little brother in I don't remember which form in Chinese, but that's what it means. And so that was always very much ingrained within every aspect of our life. Like there was just no question about it. And so my mom and my dad, I guess they got together whenever they were teenagers. Hell, I don't know. Um, I mean, obviously teenagers because they got married pretty early, but they just always went to that same church. And my grandmother was very much a part of it. So the first one that I remember was like in Hurricane, it was St. Timothy's in the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
it was beautiful because just like how you're talking about the Catholic Church, everywhere you go in any Anglican or Episcopal church that you go to, the service is the same in any country. And it's lovely because of that ritual base. I mean, for
Mm-hmm.
me, there's something that just hits me at my core. And I even get like tingly, like right now, even like saying it, whenever I know that the prayers that I'm saying and the order that we're going about the service has been done that way for like hundreds of years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ah, like that
Yeah.
just gives me like total chills. And so it was never a question as to what church that I would, I was confirmed and all of this stuff as kids and um whatever. We did the whole acolyte thing and the whole jazz. So we're full in. But where the whole Baptist kind of thing came into is there's no Episcopal kids like in Cabell County, especially like on Howell's Mill. You know what I mean? There were two
Right.
churches you went to in my little neck of the woods. Both
Yeah.
of them were Baptist.
Yeah.
And so even for me, just from a social standpoint, that's just where I naturally gravitated to. That's where the cute boys were at the time. All my friends just, one of our great friends lived across the street from the church. And so
Yeah.
I would go to mass at 8 a.m. With my dad, or sometimes if we went to the 10:30 service, which is longer, they sing a whole lot, and so we like the 8 o'clock, 45 minutes in and out. I get my sacrament.
Efficiency.
Yes, ma'am, efficiency. And so, then that evening we'd go to the Baptist church, and it was fun because it was a social place, but it was
Mm-hmm.
something that was very, very, very different in every way from what I had always been raised and what my spiritual core was. And so, we had fun at Baptist camp and things like that. I would go to church camp again. Rightly or wrongly, it was much more of a social thing for me to partake in that aspect. um, my religion came from my family and from my spiritual place. And that's where even today that I go to church there and that Cameron does as well. So mhm.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point that it was very social for us as teenagers, but I think that, a lot of it was innocent fun. I mean, it
Mhm.
was, and it was a good group of kids. Ultimately, we all turned out okay.
Yeah.
But when I went, once my mom started taking us to the Catholic church, I, eventually kind of found my way back to the Baptist church because all of you all were hanging out and doing, different things through the church. And so I started going to a different Baptist church, but we would often
Mhm.
do things with your church. And then I eventually, as high school went on, converted totally over to the church out on House Mill. But we we just had so much fun as kids, and it
Yeah.
gave me honestly a lot of value. Like, I really enjoyed the service projects that we did. I
Mhm.
enjoyed just the clean, like, fun, as corny or cheesy as that sounds. Like, I really just felt like I belonged there.
Mhm.
And so we were there every Wednesday, every Sunday.
Mhm.
We didn't miss a beat when it came to church. It was such a core part of our upbringing, even
Mhm.
at the time, like, my parents weren't even going to the same church that I was. I was like,
Yeah.
my mom was dropping me off, and she would do her thing and I would do mine. But
Mhm.
it added so much value to my life. And I think that's why it means so much to me to at least introduce it to my kids, to give
Yeah.
them the option to choose for themselves if this is what they subscribe to.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's why it weighs so heavily on me, because it was such a core part of my upbringing. And I feel like a big part of who I am today, even
Mhm.
still, even though I don't subscribe to one religion, I very much subscribe to Christianity.
Mhm.
And it's deep, to me. It's something that I value very much. So interesting that it did, maybe start somewhat social. I met some of my best friends through church
Yeah.
camp and had some of the best memories of our childhood was at church camp or after church, just all
Yes.
the times when we were just hanging around each other, just having fun. But it was always rooted in worshiping God or, really having this connection to a higher power.
Hmm.
And I can think of church camps that we went to where, there was like real spiritual things happening, it was like the Lord was like working in us. And I felt that in my core. It sounds weird to say that now, but like I can
Oh,
easily
yeah.
remember that as a teenager when I reflect upon it.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
feeling of like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So,
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
interesting to
Camp
me about the,
Cowan.
yeah, Camp Cowan. I tell you, that was, again,
That
some of the best times that we ever had.
that Vespers area, whenever you're singing those last songs as you're
Ugh,
chilling out for the night,
I mean,
that's
the
it.
campfire songs that there was no better campfire than sitting
Uh-uh.
on those rocks.
Oh, that's so true.
But so yeah, it's been interesting. Then I moved away to college, and again, it's not like I can't just find my own church. I have no qualms about just going and visiting churches. I've gone to Catholic churches down here, Baptist churches, non-denominationals. I feel like I've tried some different denominations, but I just haven't found one where I felt like, okay, this is where I would want to come each week. And
Yeah.
I could probably put more work into it if I'm being totally honest. Like I said, I've taken Jack once. Um, so it's something every week I think, okay, this is the Sunday. I'm gonna get my kids to church. I'm gonna drag them in there and drop them off at church and Sunday school, but I haven't done it. And it is on me. It's not a priority for my husband. He grew up Catholic. Um, I don't want to speak on behalf of his religion or his spirituality, but like it's just not a priority for him.
Hmm.
And so it's on me. And, I tend to have pretty crappy follow through most of the time. So it may be another couple weeks, but Easter, I like you said in the beginning, Easter is always a time of reflection, kind of feels like the start of a new. I love this time of year. I love
Hmm.
spring. It makes me think of my grandparents who were just some of the most amazing people and very religious in their own right. I think, religion helps me feel connected to people that have passed in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
especially when mom and I were in Italy and we were going to these churches that have been around forever. And, you just felt so connected. Um, it was really, really peaceful and just really beautiful to visit some of these sites that I knew my grandparents had been to, you know,
No. Hmm.
that meant so much to them. So it is, I feel like a weekly struggle. I'm like, all right, I got to find some more churches around here for us to try out. There's got to be one, right? All you need is
Right.
one
Right.
where you
But it
feel
is
totally
tough.
comfortable.
Right. But that is tough because it's so multifaceted, I think, in terms of what you connect with as an individual and then,
Mhm.
just kind of what is presented within that culture of a church or within its own belief systems. And um yeah, I don't ugh, I don't know how I would do with that without that certainty, kind of like in
Mhm.
my life. Like I just know, like if I'm going to go to a church, I just know what denomination it's going to be. Like no
Right.
matter what. Like, and I told you this a little bit ago. We were talking um even whenever I go on trips, even whenever Cameron was a little kid, if we were someplace on Sunday, guess where we were going? So we would be in the Bahamas or something because we would go there a bunch at that point. And there was an Anglican church across the bridge from where we
Yep.
stayed. And
I know
every
exactly what you're
Sunday,
talking about.
we'd walk across that bridge and we join in that church service. And it was beautiful because to be able to
Mhm.
like break bread literally uh,
Mhm.
with people of a different culture and just to feel like all is one,
Right.
it was really really cool. And I think my struggles with this now, it all comes back to being a stepmom, doesn't it?
Yeah, right.
I
At
hate
least for you right now it does, it's
it
kind of
does.
it's where you're at in this moment of time.
It does. And I hate that because it's not like it's a bad thing or I'm blaming it, but it's a factual thing too.
Hmm.
So it's all those things. But, you know, not here on Sundays. And so I can't expose her to the same things that I had, you know what I mean, the right and honor
Right.
to share with Cameron. Um, and then I just think that there's different belief systems that then you have to, or non-belief systems that you have to take into consideration when you broach something like religion with someone. I mean, you just even said it perfectly at the beginning of this, like you don't talk about two things.
Right. The
um,
cardinal sin.
right, right. So I'm just sitting here like, oh, okay. But my husband does, he's recently started to go back to the church of his childhood.
Hmm.
And he graduated from a Catholic high school, but he was not Catholic. No, no, he was there to play soccer.
Oh.
Yeah. Um, so his religious background was this little church, and they have the sweetest people on the planet there. Like I'm more than certain. And all ties are, which if I mean, it's right in a very small community outside of like Huntington a little bit.
Mm.
And there's maybe like 13 or 14 people. So I've went with him a few times. And they are literally the salt of the earth, the sweetest people in the entire world. And I'm so thankful to see him kind of having his own religious
Hmm.
connection and a place
Sure.
that he can go to and feel like a familiarity and that he grew up in that same church, but also just, I've always felt like if God says, it's time to go, it's like that Indiana Jones saying, my soul's prepared. Dr. Jones, how's yours? And so I'm always ready. I'm just sitting around here just kind of waiting,
When's
made
it
it
going to
through
happen?
today. Right, I'm okay. Um, but I'd never really felt that kind of sense with him. And, I just feel like that's something personal that you have to kind of develop within yourself. I'm not
Yeah.
a missionary or whatever, but seeing him now have that is really sweet and special. And
Hmm.
so I'm very, very much a supporter of that. And I don't go with him. I went a few times in the beginning and I don't go anymore. Uh, it's just there's just certain things, especially whenever, with my background, I just feel much more comfortable in my place, in my
Right.
lane. And I respect him for being in his, but he's brought our little girl to it a few times and she seems fine, but it's just I think in some ways I have desire to show her this other side of things too. But it's like again, finding
Is
where
it your
you're
place? Right. Is that really like your place to do that? Is that something that her mother wants her introduced to? I mean,
sure.
my belief, I think, introduce kids to all the things and see what they
Mhm.
gravitate towards, give them options in
Yeah.
life. But again, I could see that being a sticky space to be in when it's not technically, your daughter where you're making those decisions. Um,
Yeah.
I could completely see that being difficult.
It's a little tricky. I mean, like we like the Advent candles
Mm-hmm.
at Christmas time, and so she gets real. I think she likes fire. I think this is she likes the idea of a candle because we don't have them in our house except at Advent. So she likes that aspect of it. And then uh, when Cameron and I are talking about like what we give up for Lent, then she
Mm-hmm.
gets real curious about things. And
Sure.
um, but yeah, it is tricky. And I don't go to church every Sunday. And I feel like whenever I do, there's almost like an expectation, and it's probably not, that you should have to
Right.
be there every Sunday then, or you're going to let somebody down, or it's going to look bad. And it's just
Right.
that I think even has its own barrier.
Oh, I mean, that was always my mom's thing. She was like, I know plenty of people that run to the church every time the doors are open. It doesn't make them a good person. The way
Hmm.
you live your life every day and the choices that you make are truly what matter most. Not to say not to go to church, but just that doesn't make you a good person just because you go to church, every time the doors are open.
Yeah.
But I love how you gave Cam the experiences, even like in a different country,
Mm.
taking him to the same denomination, the same church essentially, but like so that he could have that commonality with people that don't look like him, that don't talk like him, that, but yeah, we subscribe to the same like core belief system, and your spirituality. So I love just that idea. That's what I want to do. That's so important to me. You
Mm.
would think that I would have put more effort into it at this point, but again, goals for this year, and this is one of them, that I wrote down, that I do want to just consistently try to find a way to um, introduce my kids to religion, just to give them the idea. A lot of things. Jack has so many questions, and he's basically
Mm.
already smarter than me at almost 8 years old. And I just don't know the answers. And he asks me questions all the time. And I'm like, that would be a great question to ask in church in Sunday school.
Mhm.
And so we got to get you back there, bud. I want to do it before he loses total interest, because he is very intrigued, and he is so curious. Again, I would just like for him to be exposed to more than he has been thus far.
Yeah.
So definitely going to make much more effort moving forward, and I'm going to hold myself accountable by talking about it on this podcast. uh, you also reminded me of something. You were like, I'm just kind of like in a space where I'm ready when my time comes. And I think for so many people, I mean, at least for me, it does give me so much peace. I really cling to my beliefs in hard times, in good times, all the time. I'm really like clinging to my belief system, but specifically in those really difficult and dark times, that's when I really need it the most. And my good friend Michelle always says, you got to get right with the Lord, because you don't know when your days are coming. And I that kind of triggered that saying in my head when you were saying, like, I'm just kind of sitting here, I'm ready when it's my day, when my time's up. But it's such a good perspective to have, like, I'm right with the Lord. Today's my day. Today's my day. It's been a wild ride, but I think it can be so helpful in kind of reducing anxiety about end of life, because that's hard, and it's something that you deal with
Yeah.
almost on a daily basis in your practice and in your real
Right.
life of having a autoimmune disorder. And so
Mhm.
it is it can be so helpful if you have a lot of anxiety or just uncertainty surrounding death.
Yeah. I do think that that's very true, or just even in hardships. And, you know, you mentioned kind of practice too. And sometimes I'll have like patients or whatever will ask me, like, how do you do this? How do you think about certain things? And I just say, well, you asked me this question. So, by all rights, I'm just going to be honest with you and tell you, I just have this very core belief that, in just faith. I just
Mm-hmm.
have faith, and I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
the easiest way to say it. And I mean, I am obviously not a saint. Um, I mean, that's real clear. But that's part of my faith too.
Right.
Is recognizing
Exactly.
that that's not the goal. Perfection's not it. And I just it's just a very peaceful thing for me. And we had this is a new thing on Sunday. My dad called me from a parking lot, and he has a bad cardiac condition and has an ICD implant. And he called and he said, I just want you to know that I've called an ambulance to come and check me out because something's wrong with my heart right now. And Jeff has just left. Cameron's on a golf course, and I'm sitting there fixing dinner. And quite literally, I just continued fixing dinner. I was like, okay. I was like, well, make sure they have my number and keep me updated. I called Jeff a few minutes later because I was cutting potatoes and um, just kind of did that. And he was like, well, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm starting laundry right now. And he was like, are you insane? I was just like, I know where this man's at, and I knew where he's at within his place.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, so much of my religious background came from that side of the family. But also, I was just like, well, what the hell am I going to do? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go down there and tell these EMS folks what to do. I'm not going to be able to have access to him if he gets into the hospital. If he goes to one of mine, I probably would, but still, it was just in the moment, I was just like, well, I mean, I know where I'm at in my relationship with them. I know where I'm at in my spiritual place. I know where he's at. So until Jeff just was like, you need to call Cameron, you need to get in the car and go down there. And I was finally like, God, okay. Maybe I am doing something wrong. And so I just went on down the road. But that's to think anything else was just not a piece of it. And I think that that's why, it's just because I'm so grounded within that faith kind of aspect. And it turned out that he was fine, and the four of us were sitting around the table that night after Rachel went to bed, just talking. And Cameron and me and my dad were all just like, yeah, and Jeff too, but he hears us talk about it differently. Probably because we're all dying. Like the three of us are probably like always actively dying, and so I think it does have a a different perspective on it. But we were just like, yeah, we're pretty cool. Like, I'm not worried about Cameron. Like, people ask me that all the time. I'm like, I mean, what should I be? As far as I know, he's okay, but I just don't have that sense. And so,
You
to
don't
speak
have
to your
that
point,
underlying anxiety all the
mm-mm,
time that something terrible is about to happen.
no,
Wow, what a grand life that must be. I
no,
cannot for the life. I mean, I'm constantly like, "Are you okay? Are my kids okay?" If I see a missed call from the school, I'm like, "Oh my God, Jack's passed out." Like, my mind goes to the worst space possible.
yeah,
Um, but you don't. I mean, you clearly have, again, you've worked in this for quite some time dealing with
yeah,
patients that are terminal. So, I mean,
mhm,
you are very good at compartmentalizing things, in my opinion. That's always been one of your strengths.
mhm,
But yeah, I think just the relief that it gives you, you're like, I mean, if this is what it is, I'm the opposite. I go into total panic mode. I would have dropped to my knees immediately and started praying. I mean, it's just like the only thing that
mhm,
can bring me comfort when I'm really upset. Um, so, I mean, I'm like, I was thinking as you're telling the story, I'm like, okay, what would I do? We had like a scare with Jeff's dad, my
oh,
father-in-law, a couple years ago, on the ski slope. He like passed out on the ski lift, and he had to be airlifted to Denver. Turns out, I mean, something was wrong at the time, but he's fine. And yeah, I just remember praying like nonstop.
mhm,
That and calling my mom, because my mom always knows what to say to calm me down. I don't know what I'll do without her, but she
oh,
has an answer for everything. Um,
mhm,
and or just she always has the right thing to say. So calling my mom and praying are like my go-tos. Take those away from me, I'm just a complete and total disaster. Um, but yeah, we're so different in that way. You're just
yeah.
like, cool, I'll see you at the hospital. Good luck, Dad. Hope that works out for you.
I mean, yeah, I guess, but
You're just a mess.
I just know that if I'm halfway around the world and this happens, I'm still in the same position. So no matter what, my ability to have any power control over anything is nil. So I don't know. There's probably something wrong with me, honestly.
No,
I mean, just to be that
you're
kind
just
of like whatever about it. But I just, I don't know. At my core, I just feel like that it comes down to faith, but I don't know. I don't know how to necessarily instill that, kind of sense within
mhm,
other people. I just think
mhm.
that it comes at your own place and point and your own openness to things. And so, but it is a challenge for sure. So what are we going to do? How are you going to find a church?
I go back to like the old fashioned way, and I'm like, I just need to reach out to people that I know take their kids to church, find out where they go. Um, I mean, I think that's always kind of like the easiest way to sort
That's a
of
good
like
idea.
find I mean, last time I just kind of like picked one and took him. And I did end up seeing somebody I knew there. I just never went back.
Mhm.
COVID happened. I want to say like right after that. I'll use that as an excuse. If not, that's why I haven't taken him for the last 5 years. Um, but I think that would probably be the best way. Actually, the churches when I worked in the schools, the churches were super involved, and especially like around our little community, which it needed a lot of support. But the churches were really good to us as a staff. Like we would come in and they would always have treats, or they would have little messages, thank you cards. They would like chalk the walk. So like, they write like nice things on the walkway that you would see walking
Oh.
into the school. I mean, they were just it was the community service aspect of it that I think I was
Mm.
really drawn to as a teenager, and what I would like for my kids, if that's something they want to do, to sort of engage in, just because it gave you such real world experience. I'll never forget, going to Chicago,
Mm.
going and buying like toothbrushes and shampoo, just little things. And then we went under the bridge and handed it out. And I mean, like those are like really significant memories in my youth. And so I just want my kids to have those opportunities outside of me providing all of these opportunities. You know what I mean? I think it's
Yeah.
good for them to sort of do things on their own, and with other groups of kids, or with other, trusting adults that are really leaders, particularly in religion, that I feel like that my kids would benefit from, because I feel
Mhm.
like I benefited so much from
Mhm.
those people in my life. So I think that's probably going to be my tactic, is just I don't the other part of that is I don't know a ton of people that go to church regularly. I could probably count
Yeah.
on one hand the people I know go to church every week. So it's not like I have this huge pool to choose from. I'm going to have to like seek out the specific people that I know. And, which is fine. That's something that I can do. I think just being, not where I grew up, and I'm not from Charleston, uh,
Mhm.
it's a little bit harder to know like exactly how each type of church is around here. It's no different than living in a small town. Every church is kind of got their thing,
Yeah.
and hard to infiltrate that sometimes, particularly in a small town. I feel like it was harder almost to
Mhm.
become a part of a church. I don't know, that could just be like my experience, but down here, the churches are so large, you can almost get lost in the sea of people.
Oh,
Whereas when
wow.
you're going to like Beulah and Baptist, people are going to notice if you were a new face around there. I mean, it's the same
Mhm.
congregation every week, and so it feels just very different on many levels. Going to church here, probably just because I don't have any real direction necessarily at this point. Just
Yeah.
I'll
I
find.
like your plan.
I
I
mean,
love it.
it's something, right? You start there.
It is. Yeah, but I like it because if you talk to like one of your friends about where they go to church, then automatically your values as a person are probably somewhat like lined up. You know what I
Mhm,
mean? And or at least like your social beliefs or whatever that looks like. By talking to a friend, then you're already kind of like get your foot in the door, have some familiarity with it, or at least you could have an honest conversation like, well, what are your all's beliefs about X, Y, and Z? Because before I bring my kid into a church, I want to see
mhm,
where you're at with this stuff, you
mhm,
know? Um, because I think that's important too, you know, whenever you bring your child into any type of situation, a school, socially, a friend group, a religious group, whatever, you want that to be in line with what your
mhm,
core kind of beliefs are, about people and about life and uh, different hot button issues, I guess. And that was something that was real important for me. Like I wanted my kids to know, um, I mean, honestly, what was taught to me is that God is love and that if you're an animal from St. Francis or if you are a human, then it does not matter. Like
right,
you're all good.
right.
And it's a very we call ourselves kind of like joking around a little bit like junior Catholics and that we don't feel guilty about anything. Um, but we were one of the first churches to welcome and to marry same-sex couples.
Mhm,
They can even be like a priest within our church, or a woman can be a priest within our church. And so it has that very open sense of a core belief that I believe in myself that's there. And I wanted that security to also be with him. And
mhm,
so that was also a part of, kind of like my rearing with it is that it just naturally fit along with whatever, my own kind of personal, social and other beliefs were. And it just, you know, I think that it has been helpful. Now we didn't go to any fun church camps, you know. I guess the days of those are gone. Um,
I hope not. Those were some of the best days.
the
I
best.
mean, the
Ah,
best. We
we sh-
had so much fun. We should start our own church camp, or we should go up and
right.
be camp counselors. That'd be fun
Oh,
at 40.
absolutely. Right.
Um,
Yes.
no, but I think that churches also change so much. I mean, when we were kids, like you were always like dressed up, and I don't know if non-denominational was like a thing in the 80s and 90s, but it certainly is now. And there are some things I really subscribe to. I like sort of like the leniency of it, and
Mhm.
show up as you are. You don't have to be in your Sunday best. Just show up as you are. And it seems a lot more social from like an adult perspective. I know it was
Yeah.
social for us as kids, but like as adults, there's like a coffee bar and snacks.
Hmm.
People go early, and it's almost like you're just meeting at a cafe before you go into church. So I mean, there's definitely some things that I liked about the church that I took Jack to. Um, but growing up and even now, I think one of the things that's so hard about specific religions, and not to like blast anyone, but it just feels very judgy sometimes.
Hmm.
And that's hard to get away from. If you constantly feel like you're going to be judged, it's really hard to embrace that. And so I guess in some ways that whole non-denominational feels a little less judgy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I only have one experience. Like, it may, again, once you're involved and really a part of a church, it may feel different. Um,
Hmm.
but it's hard to say, okay, well, I'm going to raise my kids this or that, because I don't know. I don't want them to have those same negative feelings
Yeah.
towards a church of like feeling judged, or, I mean, just feeling like they don't belong or that they're not welcome. I certainly don't want to open up that experience to them either.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not saying that anybody would. I'm sure that all churches have evolved in the last 30 years. But I've certainly myself been to churches where I did not feel like I was welcomed with open arms. So,
No, ma'am.
um, I don't
Right.
also don't want to put like a negative
Hmm.
connotation there either. So I don't know. Just some more things to add to my to-do list. Sunday church plan. It's really going to cut into our brunching.
Oh, that's
Um,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
Sunday brunch.
I mean, I just need to be more consistent, whatever it is. Again, I don't ever see myself as somebody that goes like every single Sunday, like very strictly, but just more consistently. That's my word for the year. I want to make it a part of our like routine, whether that's once a month or twice a month, just something where they're getting like the opportunity to learn about religion or faith. Really,
Yeah.
faith. I think I like that word so much more because it's about having faith in
Hmm.
something, in something
Hmm.
other, even in yourself. I really take it so personally now, the way that I talk to myself and the way I treat
Yeah.
myself, because, God made me
That's
with all these
right.
flaws. He still made me. So I need to be a
Yeah.
little nicer to myself sometimes. And that faith plays a part in that.
Yes, I think so. I think that's where compassion, kind
Yeah.
of comes from, is from that kind of religious base with things. And, you kind of mentioned something that got me thinking, like, again, I was probably raised by like hippies. Should have known that I was, at least definitely one of them. But
Nothing wrong with that.
no, but it was cool because like my dad would teach us about like Greek mythology,
Yeah.
and so like when certain things would happen, or at different points of time in my life, like whenever I used to travel to Europe by myself and I'd get the kindness from strangers,
Yes.
like the Greeks believed that the gods visit you on earth and that anyone that you come in contact with can be one of them, like in
Yeah.
disguise. And I swear I will take this to my grave that on like that first trip that I went there by myself, like there were at least five of those guys that came down from Mount Olympus and were like helping me out at different points of time. And I just remember that so distinctly. And then even being exposed to like meditation, that can even be like an Eastern thing, but you know, we would say like little Buddhist things, like if an animal died, we would say like this little prayer that came from that
Mhm.
um, kind of religious sect. And it was important for him, even though very, 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 very strict. in terms of his own religious beliefs, but a lover of all religions, I think is a way to kind of conceptualize him.
Mm-hmm.
Would teach us about Islam, or would teach us about Judaism or Hinduism. Like, so all of these different beliefs were also incorporated into our life, while also having this very, like, you're going to know the prayers of the people because we're going there at 8 o'clock in the morning. But then
Right.
that early church service means I still make brunch. So I still get the Bloody Mary at 11. Scared west by God after that goes
That's right.
down.
I, even as a kid, remember thinking, being confused, maybe is the best word, or just thinking it interesting that each religion thought their religion was the way. And if you didn't subscribe to their way, then you do not pass go, you do not get to heaven, you do not get to the pearly gates, or you might get there, but you're not getting through them. Right. And I just remember thinking, like, how do they know? How does that one religion know that they are the way? I guess that was their faith, but and especially when you're looking at Christianity and there's so many different religions within that and they do things so differently. Like, who's to say your way is better than my way, or that it's the right way? Like, oh, I've been a practiced Baptist all my life. Turns out Catholicism was the way to go. You do not pass go. Like, no, that cannot be right.
Right. Oh.
So I think that I remember having those thoughts as a kid, just like, how does anybody know that their way is the way?
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that your parents exposed you to so many different things. Like, I think that is so beautiful, and probably why you're so grounded in your faith and who you are, just because they gave you so many different opportunities to learn. And I think, like anything, you can take the best parts of those things and make it your own. Mm-hmm. And be a good person, and to live by a code of morals. And
ooh, that's good.
Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately, I think that's kind of what religion brings to us, is sort of like a code of how to be a good person for the most part. Don't kill, don't cheat on your husband, don't, those types of things. So it just, I love that your parents did that for you, especially being from such a small town where we're from in West Virginia. Like, it was like Baptist or bust, quite frankly.
It did me no favors there. None.
No favors. Look at you now. Look at you now. Look at all that you've accomplished in your life.
They weren't big fans of that. I think I was called a witch a few times, or I don't know, whatever.
There's one distinct time I remember we were all called witches.
Yeah. We had fun.
We had fun. We did. Really some of the best times of our lives. At least in our youth, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And it brought us together. I mean, there would be no LYLAS.
I know, right?
I feel like that's the truth, that church camp, really is where we got close and became the best of friends.
Oh, yeah.
I posted some pictures of us on International Women's Day, and it just, of the four of us, and I think all the pictures were actually from the church camp that we're talking about. But we had so much fun, and we were just being ourselves, like completely, just being ourselves, having a good time, just clean fun, like not doing anything crazy.
No.
But man, we had a lot of fun, and
that's sure the hard part. It was clean fun, but we were absolutely, like, literally insane. Yeah. Like, I just don't even, there were just no.
We were creative. Let's just say that. We were creative in our plans. And somebody had to follow through, and I went along with it, true to form.
I'm sure that's, maybe I just have faith that somebody's going to save me from hell, probably from church camp. But it was fun. We did. And I saw you post those pictures, and I was like, I was going to comment on it, like, oh, the guardian angels have kept us alive to this point, something. But just our faces in that, and I think that that's the spirit that shows through. And that's what we want for our kids, is to not only, whatever it is that they're doing, for them to have multiple areas of, like, personal growth that help to solidify their friendships, that help to provide them with their own internal sense of grounding, and then make them feel more connected to, like, a greater culture or place. So, oh, we'll figure it out.
We will. We will. We're smart,
Oh,
resourceful. We'll figure it
lucky.
out. Lucky, maybe. We'll figure it out.
Yes.
So we'll have some resources I'm going to upload on the webpage at thelylaspodcast.com. So you can look for some resources. Sarah has already found a good article on religion with kids. What did you say the title was?
I don't even remember, but it was
Okay.
one.
Okay. One article. She said a lot more difficult finding articles for adults, but definitely check out our webpage, our resources tab. There's so much information. And just if you want to delve into any of the topics that we've talked about over the last 11 episodes, you can find direct links to those resources on our webpage at thelylaspodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. We're on all the things at the LYLAS podcast, and make sure to download each week. Every Monday is a new episode of the LYLAS podcast. No breaks. We're running full steam ahead. So check us out every Monday wherever you subscribe to podcasts.
See, she does that so good. I could not. You say that you're disorganized and inconsistent, but you roll through that like, it's beautiful. I love
it's getting easier. We're 11 in. We're basically experts at this point, Sarah.
I'm gonna. All my other credentials are deleted off my stuff. By the way, it all says just podcaster now. How about that?
No doctor, just podcaster.
Oh, podcaster. Better title. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. Peace.